Hello everyone and welcome to this week's PECB webinar event on the basics of risk management with ISO 31000. I am Britt Ivazi, Product Marketing Manager for GRC at PECB International. I would like to thank you for sparing some time to participate in this webinar. So today's presenter is Mr. Daniel Robles, President of Cyborg Consulting Company in the Dominican Republic. Before he begins, I would like to point out to the audience that during the webinar session, if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to write them down in the chat box in the control panel on your screen, so Mr. Robles can respond to them at the end of the session. Mr. Robles, you may proceed.
Hey, good morning to everyone, or good evening. Here, 7 o'clock in the morning in my country. Thank you for having this opportunity. Today we are going to be talking about the basics of risk management using ISO 31000, which is going to be our guideline to manage risk today. We are a small company in Dominican Republic, and we do security, consulting, implementation, risk management, training, and tons of things we do regarding technology and risk. Recently, I was watching a field documentary. It was about this person. His name is Pettit. He's an extreme risk manager. What do I mean by that? Well, the story goes like this. This is a real life situation. This really happened. What you see over here is one of the twin towers in Manhattan, just the same towers that disappeared because of 9/11. Before that, Philippe Pettit, he had a dream. He's a tightrope, the man that walks on wire. And what he did is he made a team of person that liked his idea of putting a wire between the twin towers and going across. It's gonna be a kind of record in its own, because nobody did it before. For this project, they may not get approval, and they have to do everything undercover. They took years planning until the morning that they got ready. They put the wire, the tensors, and everything, and now is the moment to get across. The objective for him will be to get across from one tower to another tower on the wire. But he has many obstacles that must be considered, and all the situation has to be answered before putting his life on the wire to get across the towers. He has the wind, he has the wires, he has so many elements that need to be considered, put in place in order to make a safe walking on the wire across the towers. He got so far that he could even sit on the wire for several minutes. I will suggest you to take a look on that documentary film, because it's very, very interesting. The thing is that what was on the wire was his life. There was no way to get back if he failed. Everything will be gone just in a matter of seconds. It could even happen that because they were trying to achieve fame or a world record or notoriety or whatever, there may even happen that he may be found dead on the sidewalk, on the street, and nobody will know where did this guy appear from? But before getting from one tower to another, he has to solve every situation. And this is what we are going to be talking about today. We are going to be talking about risk management. The questions we are going to try to answer today is: what is risk? How do we react to risk? The need for risk management, the different type of risk management versus management of risk, how to treat risk, and the structure of a risk management program. Another question we may answer today is risk as a role or as a function. Since risk is inherent to existence, there is always going to be risk in any human activity. Even when being just an observer, there are risks. Risk is inherent to existence. The way to respond to risk is by means of a risk management framework. When properly implemented in every activity of the organization, not only become more resilient, but are able to assure that business objectives will be met. Because what risk management does is consider the possibilities that things may not happen as expected. When you are continuously managing risk, you'll be able to foresee and overcome those situations that may affect the objective. But what is risk? When we are talking about risk, what are we talking? And we're gonna see the notes direct from the standard. On the note 1, it says that risk is an effect of deviation from expected that could be positive or negative. Risk is not always bad. Risk could be positive as well as negative. Positive when you make a gain. Negative when you receive a damage. That's something very important to have, because we can manage risk in our favor, or we can manage risk in our defense. On the second note, we have that objective can have different aspects, such as financial, health, safety, and environmental goals, and can apply at different levels, such as strategic in the long term, organization-wide, specific to a project or product and process. The risk is often characterized by reference to a potential events and consequences, or a combination of this. Or what we are going to see today is that when we are talking about risk, we are talking most of the time of the consequence of the combination of probability and consequence. I mean, an impact. And that point where they meet, the probability and the consequence, that's the level of risk that we are going to face on any given scenario. Risk is often expressed in terms of combinations of an event, included changes in circumstances. Because, for example, when you go back here, there could be a change in the environment, what we have before, like this. There could be a change in the environment. It could be the weather, it could be the wind, it could be his health. He just can become dozy at that height. But those changes in the circumstances and the associated likelihood of occurrence. I was seeing another documentary about a person that have these appendices while being in the South Pole. And then after that, because the probability for someone to have a situation in his digestive system, anyone that goes into missions like this to the South Pole or to the space, they made a surgery first and remove the appendices. That's how you call it in English?
Yes.
Okay. They remove it because in that way they remove the probability of occurrence. And that's a kind of risk management. When we are talking about ISO 31000, we are talking about this international standard that provides principles and generic guidelines for risk management. Uh, it can be used by any public, private, or community enterprise, association, group, or individual. Therefore, this standard is not specific to any industry or sector. It could be used on any type of organization of every nature, of every size, wherever it is. It is different when we talk about security standard. It is different from 2505, which is a standard for risk management, but specific to information security. 31000 is just an open standard for anything, any type of situation of any organization. Something interesting is that it is a guideline and it cannot be certified. There's no certification related to this process. PECB has a certification, but for the person, for the people. It's a certification of a, they call it ISO 31000 risk manager, which is the competence that a person has to deal with risk. It is not a methodology on how to achieve certain goals. It's just a guideline that you follow that may help you to assess and manage risk within your given activity. What is risk management then? Well, I'm going to refer to this Bruce Nair article on this magazine. He says that risk management is a fancy term for the cost-benefit trade-off associated with any security decision. A trade-off is one thing or another. It's what we do when we react to fear or try to make ourselves feel secure. And something interesting is that we make systematic risk management mistakes, miscalculating the probability of rare events, because rare events are not that often. We may say, this may not apply to me, this may never happen. But since that happen very often, we have controls in place. I'm going to show you in a minute. Reacting more to stories than data, responding to the feeling of security rather than reality, and making decisions based on irrelevant context. One of the mistakes we make when considering events of rare probability is, for example, if we are driving cross country in a city environment, you may take the risk of having no extra tire for your car. But if you are going cross country in a desert, you may not take that risk. You have to check your car completely before starting the trip. Here we come to appetite and attitude. Risk appetite is the amount and type of risk that an organization is willing to pursue or retain. What this means is that most of the companies, they look at the benefits and they say, how can I increase my benefits, my profits? It could say, well, instead of having this very secure building, maybe we can move to another building that is not that secure, but it it represents a profit. A risk appetite for a company, something that happened over here, is that some companies, they don't pay insurance because they say, what I pay for insurance, I can save it, and if anything goes wrong, I can pay it from the savings that I made from not having the insurance. That's the risk appetite. It doesn't mean it works or it doesn't work. It's a way to manage risk, and the company or organizations need to know how much or how far they want to get. The risk attitude is the organization approach to assess and eventually pursue, retain, take, or turn away from risk. What we mean by that is that the attitude is toward risk, and the risk appetite is how far they want to go with risk in order to make a gain or increase the profit. Regarding the attitude and how the attitude is different on many situations, how people show different attitude toward risk. Here we have this picture in Spain. What they do is that on these tiny streets, they let loose bulls, and people run in front of the bulls. People just take pictures, they enjoy having the pictures, but some want to have the real experience. They want to go to the stream and they run in front of the bulls. Every year, people from the same people that is running before the bulls, many of them are fatally injured, some of them are even dead. But this is an illustration of attitude toward risk. They want to get involved in the risk. They don't want to get involved in the risk. There is a senior person. Here we have senior persons. But the attitude, how you approach risk, how you get involved into risk, how you get away from risk, that's what it means, the attitude regarding risk. Any question up to this moment?
Mr. Robles, I will be communicating the questions at the end.
Okay, fine.
Okay, thank you.
What can we do pertaining risk? The risk can be and must be measured. The risk could be quantitative, expressed in terms of numbers of units. What units? No, that's gonna be related to the specific organization doing the risk management. But the risk could be and should be measured. It doesn't matter if it is quantitative or if it is qualitative. Expressed in relative values such as high, low, medium, very high, catastrophic. What scale are you going to use for this? No, that is up to you. That belongs to the process you are dealing with. The components of risk are always going to be the probability and the impact. The probability, by probability, it means how possible or how frequently, how sure are we that this may happen or could happen. Well, for this, how do you measure, how do you put a vote, how do you estimate the probability? For that, you can use statistics, you can use history, you can use information that help you understand the probability of any given situation. And the impact, if that happens, how much it will hurt, how much it will give us an advantage, how much will it cost, how will it affect our core business or activity. Probability and impact is going to be used in almost any risk management scenario. And here we come to the principles, the framework, and the risk management process. One of the principles regarding risk management is that it creates value for the organization because it helps us ensure that we are going to meet the objectives. It should be an integral part of the organization processes. It means that it may not be just an isolated role for somebody in some dark room. No, that be part of every process. I'll give you a real life example. Sometimes when I'm going downstairs, I use it to put the sweater or shirt or anything while going down the stairs. But because of risk management understanding, I say, gee, what about if I stumble or I slide in the way downstairs? I could kill myself or I can be hurt. Because when you have the risk management mindset, you are always considering what happens in your environment. That's part of the decision making based on information on the risk management. It will be also interactive. It will be something that is continuously and should be responding to change, because the situations that you evaluate today will not be the same forever. They're gonna be changing. They're gonna be there's going to be new information that you need to take and think about it. For example, many years, 20 years ago, the environmental issues are not the same. 25 years ago, we were not thinking about the tsunamis that we have seen in the several decades, in the last decades. And we have to also understand how the human and cultural factors affect, particular in which, in a negative way, we can think of terrorism. But now we can also think of the way as a profit or beneficial way, is how the people is reacting, how the people is more eager to be protected. Then you can have now an opportunity to sell insurance and things like that, because of the cultural and human situations. Oh, sorry. Then we have the framework in which we have the mandate and commitment to manage risk. in which it's just the same PCDA, plan, do, check, add. We design the framework for managing risk. We implement the risk management. We monitor and review the framework, and we continuously improve. That's why we need something going on continuously, because situations, the probability, the impact, the human factors, the industry situations are always changing and must be managed in a way. The risk management process, the first thing, that you have seen this other uh, in other standards, is that you establish the context and then you do the risk management. That risk management is a three-part process. It means risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. All this is called risk management. And then comes the risk treatment, in which you react and you respond to the previous steps that you make in the risk assessment. This is going to help us understand and do the evaluation and prioritization on the risk management process. Here we have in a different size. What do we mean by establishing the context? Well, we need to understand our reality. Risk management should be oriented to the real situations of the organizations that or the organization that is doing the process. By risk identification, what we do is that we identify the source of risk, the different type of risk that we may face in any given activity. By risk analysis, what we do is that we try to understand and measure this risk that we are analyzing. We need to put measure on this. And on risk evaluation, what you do is that you compare the different levels of risk that you have calculated, and then you can do a proper prioritization, prioritize how you are going to treat the risk. Risk treatment is the name that is given to the different responses that you can do in order to respond to risk. What we have here is a risk matrix. And the risk matrix, on the vertical, we have the likelihood or probability that something can happen, and there you have the consequences. This is a qualitative risk matrix. It could be quantitative, and here we are going to have just numbers. But in this particular case, we are thinking of qualitative, and we are using relative values like rare, unlikely, moderate, likely, almost certain, and then we are going to have the consequences. You see, on the vertical, you have the probability, and on the horizontal, then you have the impact that is going to happen, how much it will hurt if these things happens. When you combine the probability with the impact, then you have the risk level. And depending on the value that you select for every one of these, you're going to have different values. This is a 5x5 matrix, which gives us 25 possibilities on how the measurement of risk. I have a question. One question will be, how would you rate the likelihood or the impact of any given situation? Well, there are many ways to do that. First of all, you can determine that by expert judgment. That's why you hire experts. Like they give you insight on how to measure this, even when there's no data, but they come in with their huge experience and they give us information on how we can rate the probability of any given situation. And the consequences, the same thing. It is good when we can use numbers, but most of the times we don't have the source for that number, specifically in industries that are so new. It's not like in the banking system that you have everything being measured for hundreds of years. But in many areas, everything is new. Even some companies don't reach to maturity because they disappear or they are transformed in the process. Well, but continuing on the idea of how do we value this, another way could be a vote in which we can use something like a Delphi system in which we can have representatives from different areas on the organization, and we can say how would you rate the possibility of this event, and everyone will vote, and then we can come up with a conclusion, and we can say, okay, we have 2 unlikely and 3 moderate. Okay, how will we rate this? Then we will go and say it will be moderate if we want to use a worst case scenario. The same thing, how we gonna measure the impact, it's something that we can go on and vote as well, or we can use the information. And depending where this intersection goes of the likelihood and the impact, then we can say we can say or we can value the risk for any given combination. What we have on risk matrix, we can, some people also call it a heat matrix, because what they do is that they say, okay, anything that is a low value, is a low risk, you just accept it. You just do nothing because you can live with that. And if that happens, then we will find out. But the probability and the impact, both of them are low, then the combination is low. You see, and everything that is low, you just accept it. The same thing for moderate value. For anything that is green, you just do nothing. You just accept it. For anything, any combination of probability and consequences that gives you yellow, then you do a planning. A planning is that when you say, okay, we're gonna work on this, we're gonna create a plan, you can even say we have to work on this maybe by next year. But if something goes into a stream, then you have to work right away. And this is a table also give us our acceptance of risk on how we react to risk on the decision making. This is a table of the risk management process. This is the 3 parts that we mentioned before of the risk management, in which you do the identification, you do the analysis, and you do the evaluation. I'm just providing you this table so you can see them, the 3 of them. This is the risk that's been identified: loss of IT data, loss of a building, denial of access to the building, loss of vital records, loss of a given service. It could be everything that is related to your environment, that is real to your context. And what you do is you identify it. you understand the source of risk, you understand the different elements that can affect you for this. On the analysis, you are going just to try to measure it. You're gonna say if it is going to be major, rate, likely or unlikely. Then the evaluation, what it's going to do is that because of this table, you take this combination into consideration, and what you do is that you need to do this evaluation because you are comparing the values. It means which one do you need to work first? The one that shows extreme risk. The other ones need to be planned to work on that, but those that are low, we don't spend any resources trying to overcome this risk because they don't hurt that much. They don't pose a threat to the company, or they don't show any significant profit. Remember that the risk could be either positive or could be either negative. And here we come to the risk treatment. The risk treatment is how do we react to risk. Once we do this, once we do the evaluation, how do we react to risk? Well, there are 4 ways in which we react to risk. The first one is accepted. It means do nothing, just leave it as it is. Don't try to change anything, because if in that scenario, if something happens, it may or may not hurt, it may or may not be an advantage, and it doesn't make sense to put any resource in order to change the risk. The rejection of the risk is just to avoid the risk at all cost and not having the activity related to that risk. Let's say, how do you handle the situation when you are storing HAZMAT, hazardous material, or fuel in your house? No, that's something that you say, no, I don't want to store anything that is explosive, toxic, or inflammable in our house. That's something that we are going to reject. When we need fuel, when we need gasoline, or when you need gas oil or any type of fuel, we go and buy it. That's the reason you don't have big tanks in your yard just storing fuel, because you are rejecting the risk of having those materials. You can transfer the risk, which means you give the response, you give the execution of that particular activity to somebody else, or you give others the consequences of the risk. Let's say what you do for an activity like a call center for your company. If you are going to have a call center for your company, then you need to have a human resources department. Then you have to deal with pregnancies, you have to deal with vacations, you have to deal with rising salary environments, then you have to deal with missing people in the work, not showing at work. Then you need to do so many things for you to handle the call center environment. But something you can do is that you can just outsource the call center, and you have someone else that is taking care of those situations. They are taking care of that. You pay a fixed fee or a given amount of money, and they take care of that part of the business, and you concentrate yourself. Another thing that you can do is that instead of having uh, many cars for your family or in the company in case that anyone goes broken, or in a crash, what you do is that you do insurance policy, and you are paying somebody else to take the financial responsibility of the reposition as well as the legal uh, consequences of driving a car. And the mitigation is the control that you insert or that you implement in order to mitigate the risk. When we say mitigate the risk, when you treat the risk in that way, we are trying to affect either the probability or the impact in some way. I don't know if you remember this guy from the X-Files. Uh, I saw that and I said, I want to quote this. The response has to be to the size of the risk. And that's one of the big mistakes that we make when managing risk, because sometimes we don't put the control in a way that is strong enough to contain the risk or reduce the risk in the way that we are expecting. I'm going to show you this on risk acceptance. I was recently in Ecuador. Ecuador is a city in the Andes, which is the mountain system of South America. It was interesting to me that the city of Quito is surrounded by volcanoes. And that situation made me nervous because I'm not familiar with this. But for them, it's risk acceptance. They live with the reality that they are surrounded by 8 or 9 volcanoes. What do they do about it? They do nothing. If anything goes wrong with a volcano, there's nothing you can do. They live their life. They expect that nothing is going to happen. They are accepting the risk. They are not doing anything to treat it. Actually, there's nothing for you to treat a volcano. You just treat the consequences. The risk rejection is just the same scenario. The city is Ecuador, of Quito is surrounded by volcanoes. Nice being here. That's the risk acceptance. And it's also showing the attitude. The risk rejection is surrounded by volcanoes, and the rejection is don't move there because there are volcanoes. Risk transfer. Well, let's say that you have some operation running in city of Quito. You can say, okay, I will insurance. I will put an insurance on that activity that we have, but or accept human life that cannot be insurance. I mean, something that you cannot cover for insurance because there's no way for a reposition. And the risk mitigation in this particular case, since you cannot work on the volcano itself because it is the source and the force of nature is so big, what you can do in order to mitigate if anything happens is have the ability to evacuate the city and get away from the source of the risk. The residual risk. The residual risk is the level of risk that still exists after inserting the control. This is what happens. I saw this in the Japan earthquake several years ago. They have these sorts of risk, which is the river, which is the sea. And what did they do in order to reduce the impact? They constructed this wall just to contain the water in case of a flooding. That's great, and that worked for years. But then after that, we came to realize, the world came to know that leaves are not an effective solution for tsunamis and other situations. We can see the same picture, we can see the control, we can see the source of risk, but they were not considering what if we are hit by an earthquake. We have these huge waves coming into the city, and we can see this, and we also can see that the leaves are not a very good idea in order to control tsunamis. In many cities or towns close to the ocean, they constructed huge leaves. But what happens? That the leaves could not contain the force or the magnitude of the tsunami. Something that we learned on the residual risk is on the city of New Orleans. I don't know if you remember what happens when the Hurricane Katrina hit the city many years ago. What they have is that they constructed a system of leaves, of walls to contain water, but there's a design flaw in the city. The city is below the level of the water of the river and the lake. So there's no way. There's too much effort to keep the city dry, but if anything goes wrong, if there's a wall on this leaf or on this side, the water will start coming. So residual risk is something very important to take into account when managing risk, because we can work on the source, but sometimes we can work on the source of the risk, but sometimes the only way is to move away from the source of the risk, because it doesn't matter how much effort or resources you invest into a control to mitigate it, the residual risk is going to be high. Okay. Now I think we have just a few minutes left. Can we go into the questions now, please?
Yes, so I have three questions at the moment. The first one is, what is a positive and a negative risk?
Okay, let's say a positive risk. A positive risk will be, let's use this. Let's use this. You are going to build a house. You are going to build a building. And you say the ground, or the, how do you call it, the soil, the properties in this area is cheaper than in the mountains. And because it's cheaper, you can say building an office building in this area will give us enormous savings. That's going to be positive, because you are having a saving, you are gaining money from taking that risk. A negative risk is that because you are too close, you can lose everything, as happened in this picture. When you have the positive risk, you take advantage of the situation. when you have a negative risk, the risk damages your organization in terms of money, financial status, life, health, environment, whatever. Your capabilities to keep production, that everything is going to be affected by negative risk.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is the relationship between risk and materiality?
The risk and materiality, it has to deal on how sure we know that this will affect us. Because what happens is that we can have this risk, but the situations for that to happen are so difficult to meet that there's no feasible way for that to happen in a given environment. For example, let's say we have this, let me use an example. Okay, think of the Earth, the planet Earth. We have seen all these movies that a big asteroid comes and crash into the Earth, but because of the gravitational system of the Earth, the magnetic fields, on the route that this asteroid has to pass, we are not sure that this is a material that this risk can materialize as said by doomed persons. I don't understand if I answer your question.
Thank you very much. I think that was clear. The next question is, how can we identify risks?
Okay, how do you identify risk? Okay, what you do is that you take a given activity. You take a given activity. Let me do this. For example, this. Your objective is to get across, okay? To get across. You take into account all the obstacles that you have to overcome. Okay, the first of all, there's a risk trying to get across, and one of the obstacles is that if you use shoes, you're gonna slide. Then something that they do, okay, because one of the source of risk, if the thickness or thinness of the wire, then I have to go on barefoot, for example, because in that way I can take care of I can adjust my foot to the wire. You can say another source of risk for that is, for example, the wind. The wind. What happens if there's a strong wind? Then for that, then what they do is, in order to answer to that, they have this stick, and this they use it as a balancer, and they take into account everything, because in this particular environment they say, I need this wire to be tense enough so you don't have waves and you don't make it swing, because if you swing, you're gonna you can slide easier. The thing is that you select a given activity, let's say any activity that you like, and you see what are the elements involved into this activity. You have the wire, you have the wind, you have the humidity, you have that your stomach cannot work well in that time. So you say, okay, I can have breakfast before going to work on the wire. And for any one of those elements, you put it in a table and you say, okay, what I'm going to do with this is that for any given element, I'm gonna measure it, and I'm gonna then find a way to treat that particular risk. You have to select an activity, and you have to take into account all of the threats, agents that can work against you to complete that activity.
Thank you very much. We will take one more question. Does doing a SWOT analysis cover all risks?
Please repeat the question.
Yes. Does doing a SWOT analysis cover all risks?
Oh, no. You take into account what are the most probable, because for example, where I live, there are risks that are not related to my context. But in a case that you are working in such an environment, you have to take into account all known risk and then work on those that has the highest probability, because many of them may not be present in your environment. Then you concentrate on those that are identified and that have an impact and a probability to work on it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Robles. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was great the way you related to the real case scenarios. It provided us with a more clear understanding of the risk concepts in general. So if anyone has any further questions, please email me at asia@pcb.com and we'll respond to them accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Robles, again for your presentation and the audience for your participation. If anyone wants to refer back to this webinar, please note that this webinar is recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel no later than tomorrow. Keep updated by checking our website and other communication channels on upcoming webinars. Thank you again, and I look forward to your participation in upcoming webinar sessions. Mr. Roble, if you would like to conclude with something.
Yeah, remember that this is a very generic risk analysis guideline. It's supposed to be used on any type of a scenario. It's not properly related to IT. It's not specific to any given industry. As you can see, the examples I use are for all sorts of life, mostly of them related to nature, because that is going to be more neutral to all of us, because the reality in your environment may be different than ours in those situations. Risk management has to be iterative. That's something that has to be considered in every activity. It's not something that should be related to some given guy, so he is the one that deals with risk. There's nobody to know more about risk than the one that is working with a given objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much.